I want to bring in Fox News national security analyst KT McFarland and former U.S. Army Green Beret officer Ben Collins. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you. KT, your reaction to this?
You know, we've had presidential scandals for less than this. The Iran-Contra affair in the Reagan administration was all about, did we pay ransom for hostages? When I was in the Reagan administration, my military assistant was taken hostage in Beirut, in Lebanon, and he was ultimately tortured and killed. The reason we don't pay ransom is because the minute you do, they take more hostages. So you may save the few people that you've gotten released because of the ransom, but you put an X on the back of every American after that point. And it's in fact what happened, because the 4 American hostages were released. We gave them the ransom money. 2 more were taken.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, this was a secret deal. Why is this coming out now that we paid all of this cash to Iran right around the time that the nuclear deal was being done, and to get these hostages back? Well,
we knew that the money had been paid because it was a $1.7 billion payment. It's complicated, but it was money left over from the 1970s. What we didn't know was that there were pallets of cash.
Right.
That there were actual bills, the euros and other
Swiss francs,
Swiss francs that we actually delivered to the Iranians. You know, I think the Iran deal, the closer and closer you look at it, the smellier and smellier it gets.
And Ben, they made this $400 million payment to Iran in foreign currency because transacting with Iran in U.S. dollars is a violation of our sanctions against Iran. So that's what message does the secret deal using all foreign currency, what message does that send to the American people?
In the middle of the night on the back of a Gulfstream.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
You might as well put it in a paper bag.
And which I think they did, practically. And on top of that, we also released 7 Iranian prisoners, right? So, I mean, this just shows kind of the deal-making that we do, right? I mean, we remember the Taliban 5, right? I mean, we got our star player, Bergdahl, who walked off an American base, and we gave him back 5 Taliban commanders, and some of them have already gotten back to the battlefield. But most importantly here is they said, well, we did this because we wanted to have a show of good faith, and tensions have been eased. And this is on the back of them taking our sailors hostages and putting them on their, on their knees.
This happened before that.
Correct, but when for me, this is just very indicative of this administration's the way that they engage, right? They do it secretly. They know that the American public would not be happy with this, but it's just
and the
middle of the
problem
night.
with it is the precedent it sets, because now the next president of the United States is going to be expected to pay ransom. You go, and it's continuing to go on, and this president doesn't understand or doesn't care that the precedent he is setting for future American presidents is a very bad one, and it puts us in a very
well, it also flies in the face of the policy that we've been encouraging the Europeans in kidnapping for ransom in Africa and the Sahel. We've said that do not pay ISIS, do not pay these groups. There's credible reports out right now. Iran funds Hezbollah. There's reports out right now that Hezbollah is now paying their fighters in cash. Iran is the single biggest
and Iran funds Syria.
Iran funds Syria. I mean, you could go down the list. They're the single biggest sponsor of terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism in the world. So this, not only does it set a precedent, it flies in the face of what we've been telling our allies and partners for the past 15 years about kidnapping for ransom. How does Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Africa make most of their money? It's through kidnapping for ransom.
And the important point, though, that you made is that they're now paying those Hezbollah fighters in cash. That money had dried up before the Iran deal.
And to Morgan's point that Iran is funding the Assad regime. We oppose the Assad regime and have talked, well, the Obama administration has talked incessantly about getting rid of Assad. Well, we just essentially indirectly handed him money. And I just want to point out what's going on in Iran. After this payment was made, Revolutionary Guard commanders on state media came out and said America had succumbed to Iranian pressure. And that's how the American people see it, as we rightfully should, that this secret payment was made. Pallets of cash in foreign currencies was shipped and delivered the exact same day, according to
and let's not forget
that report, that the hostages were released.
Banks in the United States have paid millions of dollars in fines, hundreds of millions of dollars in fines for transacting any sort of business in Iran. So the same thing that this administration and the Fed and the Department of Justice in New York, the same thing that they have fined tens of millions of dollars to banks for doing, the administration have done themselves.
Yeah, you're right. And a new map released to the White House by the National Counterterrorism Center shows that ISIS is spreading its reach, showing a threefold increase in the number of places where ISIS operates right now. Why is ISIS able to spread in so many countries in spite of aggressive airstrikes and campaigns? I mean, it just feels like this group is getting stronger and stronger, KT.
Yeah, and you know, again, it's a cynical use of military force by the president. He's just going to throw a couple of troops here, and he's going to do a couple of airstrikes there, so he can kind of pass the problem on to the next president. Well, at the same time, ISIS is open to second front in Europe, as we have seen week after week after week. I mean, day after day after day, as there are ISIS-affiliated attacks in Europe.
What should be done, Ben?
Well, you know, and also, you know, looking at that map, what it doesn't show is the aspirational ones as well, right? I mean, if you look, I mean, I think at the max there's 18 countries that they've highlighted, and that's ISIS core and then other ISIS countries. But they've actually conducted attacks in up to 24 countries. So yes, there's not, it doesn't show, but I mean, just look at what's happened in Europe, you know, France and Belgium. So, you know, it's aspirational there, in Germany especially.
This is one of the reasons people feel that Hillary Clinton is questioned in terms of her approach to ISIS, because on her watch, ISIS has gotten stronger.
Absolutely. And if you think that she's not going to be the third term of Barack Obama, he is out there campaigning actively for her to be president so it can be his third term. So if you like what you've had so far, you're going to love.
Well, he's protecting his legacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
He is, but if you look at that legacy, you know, airstrikes and soldiers alone aren't going to work. I mean, the problem is we don't have a day after plan, right? So what happens the day after? You know, airstrikes alone just don't work. I mean, we're going to see that in Libya. I mean, Libya has basically collapsed as a country. The only saving grace for Libya is it has oil, right? So there is some natural resource, but there's no plan. How are you going to rebuild
Her plan
Libya?
is more intelligence.
That's what she always says.
Yeah,
You're right.
more intelligence.
But even if we throw troops on the ground, you know, we've learned this lesson, hopefully, in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, we can only go so far, but who's going to pick up those pieces? What's going to happen the next day? How are you going to, you know, stabilize the country? How are you going to get rid of the militias?
And that's why we can't berate our allies and take aggressive stance against NATO.
Well, you need a comprehensive approach that has an economic, a political, an ideological, a military, and a diplomatic concept that you go after ISIS, all of the above, not just a little here, a little there, and then hope for the best.
KT, good to see you. Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you.